This is a good question, and it's a little complex. It's about child find, but it's a little complex as far as to understand the nuances. So this is a very good question. When is child find triggered in public charter schools? When the child is transitioning from a private school, which of course you're saying that in South Carolina, private schools or homeschools are considered private schools, which is not uncommon in many states. All right. But your child was already identified and received services prior to homeschooling when you revoked IDEA and decided to pull your child, that your child had an IEP and was eligible under OHI and speech and language impairment at the time. So you withdrew her from public school to homeschool her at that time of fourth grade. Now, what I would sort of need to understand, I can continue to answer the question, but what I would need to understand is whether you truly revoked IDEA services or you just withdrew her. Because if you withdrew her, you didn't revoke anything. You just withdrew your child. If you went through the process of a revocation and then withdrew her, which was completely unnecessary, and not that I have any knowledge of why or anything. But the thing that you said you did it simultaneously. There was no need to revoke special ed services. If you withdrew your child to homeschool, they wouldn't be entitled to those services anyway. So now there's a public charter or there's a charter school that your child is now enrolled in, but not really, because that enrollment doesn't really trigger until the first day of school. That's what your question states. And they're saying that until your child is enrolled, then it doesn't populate in the power school system. And at that point, that's when the child find process would start to do the evaluations or eligibility. No, that isn't the case. First of all, special education is year round. Okay. If your child has a qualifying disability, is in need of specialized instruction, which is the twofold standard, then at that point, no, you need to do that as quickly as possible upon the school having knowledge that your child may be, let's say, suspect, knew, or should have known. That's the standard. Whether the district knew, suspected, or should have known that your child may be a child with a qualifying disability and be in need of specialized instruction, which of course yours is. Okay. Now you sit there and you say, well, yours is. That's different. You see, there's no suspicion. Your child used to have an IEP. So quite frankly, this isn't even an initial eligibility. This isn't a reevaluation because your child has already prior been identified. Now, what we're doing is we're reevaluating to see whether she continues to meet the minimal standards to receive an IEP. But initial eligibility for special education only happens once, guys. Unless your child's denied, but even if your child's been denied, you still have to go through the process again. Initial eligibility, once your child goes through it, let's say your child went through it 5-6 years ago and you said, screw it, I'm homeschooling, and you don't enroll your child again until high school, for example. Guys, it's still not an initial eligibility. Your child has already previously been evaluated. It would be a reevaluation consideration because your child has already gone through that process of suspicion. Well, there was no suspicion. Your child had an IEP. Your child's been identified. Okay? Now, the question would be not whether your child has a qualifying disability. The question now is, does your child continue to need specialized instruction? That's why it's a reeval. It's not, you're not reverting back to initial eligibility. Your child's already in the South Carolina system as being identified. Now, just because you revoked or just because, it doesn't undo that. It doesn't somehow magically wash the process. All right? So yes, they should be doing it. And the excuses that she doesn't show up in the system, put your child behind the 8 ball, so to speak. You're not starting off with an IEP. And like I said, it's a reeval. It's not an initial eligibility. So the timeline even would be different. The only problem is that you know, if your child is going after, let's say, other health impairment, unfortunately, your child has been homeschooled. So therefore, some of the requirements to be qualified under other health impairment, they cannot accomplish during the summer. And that is, they have to have behavior rating skills or adaptive behavior rating skills filled out by people that know your child the most. Well, your child's been homeschooled. So it's better to get that process started probably in July or somewhere, because the staff have to know her for 6 to 8 weeks before they can even fill those out. And that's sort of the one thing that's not their fault. It's not your fault either. You made a choice to homeschool. That's not anybody's fault. It's just that those are the minimal requirements. That's the reality of the process. Okay? So there might be a 6 to 8 week lag period between you being able to get that IEP in place. It doesn't mean that the protective measures aren't there. And it also, if that's the case, it doesn't necessarily put you in a position to demand compensatory either, because, like I said, it's a reeval situation, and there are mechanisms, or there could be mechanisms for them to consider with regards to reaching back in the past for what accommodations were there, and in the interim, they could have a 504 in place that could at least serve the equal access and accommodation needs of the child while they're doing that reeval process. But it is not an initial eligibility in that traditional sense.